Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really happy to be reading for you. The plan today is to get some money advice from Spirit at the time you find this video, and we're going to do that first by doing the book method of divination with this wonderful book called Money Magic, and then we'll pull from the tarot to get further advice. So we'll start with the book method of divination. It says, I ask clearly for what I need, and the universe listens and responds. All right, we're ready to make moves. We looked at our lives and our behaviors to figure out where we're currently located, and we dug deep in our subconscious to determine where we'd like to be healed, well, healed might make sense there too, but it actually says where we'd like to be headed. In this step, we'll create an intention to further refine our direction and set our journey into action. It's like hitting the Get Route button on your energetic GPS. Turn the key in the engine and let's actually get going. So let's just take a peek here. It looks like this is the start of a new step. So we're on step 4, set your intention, let's go. Help your desires turn the corner into action. Okay, so I'll finish reading this page. It says, intention is where desire turns the corner into action. Oh, funny. That's what I just read. Help your desires turn the corner into action. Wow. Doesn't this look so cool with this arrangement here? Wow. Okay. Onward. I'll read that one more time. Intention is where desire turns the corner into action. So let's get into the process of creating financial intentions, shaping our desires into the sharp precision of an intention that will cut a clear path for us to travel. We're cultivating agency and sovereignty by fully owning each step. And in this step, that means taking responsibility for turning our desires into intentions. Okay, so 2 things. One is I just literally edited a video. At the time I'm recording this, I edited a past video and I just uploaded it to YouTube. And it was about how sovereignty requires mastery. And we talked about how like it's, you know, we all want sovereignty, right? We want this feeling of freedom and agency and resourcefulness and being resourced in our life, right? But I think a lot of times, or I'll speak for myself, I had to go, I still am practicing, and I had to go and undergo a very intense, longer than I wished season of realizing that, you know, sovereignty does require mastery. And those are not my words. I don't know who to credit them to, so my apologies. I wouldn't have been able to put that wording to the season I was referencing as I was going through it, but it certainly like summarizes what I felt I went through, which was this potent season of realizing that, you know, you don't just get to be handed sovereignty. You know, you essentially, well, and maybe even put another way, like you can't sustain sovereignty when there's immaturity, right? So we all have to grow ourselves up, which is a brilliant book, by the way. I can put that in the description box, Grow Yourself Up. So, but again, just to summarize, it's sovereignty requires mastery. And I'm getting that here where it says we're cultivating agency and sovereignty by fully owning each step. Let's just like take a breath on that. I'm going to read it one more time. We're cultivating agency and sovereignty by fully owning each step. So my point in bringing up the other video is there might be something there for you. I will link it up in the description box of this video. And then additionally, recently I just posted a video where we looked at the idea of sovereignty, and we used the 9 of Pentacles as the like theme of the reading to represent sovereignty. And we got information about how to cultivate more sovereignty in your life. So I will link up that video as well. Okay, we'll continue here. Once again, it says we're cultivating agency and sovereignty by fully owning each step. And in this step, that means taking responsibility for turning our desires into intentions. The blessings you desire unfold in your actions. You are holding the power of transformation within you. So let's get focused and get you moving in the direction of your desires. Moving from a desire to an intention is a process of clarification and discernment. We opened up to the abundance of brainstorming our desires. Now we apply our strategic mind, our politics, our values, and our priorities to distill what it is we are going to put our efforts towards truly creating in our lives. I'm going to read, that was a bit choppy. My apologies. I'll read it one more time. Now we apply our strategic mind, our politics, our values, and our priorities to distill what it is we are going to put our efforts towards truly creating in our life. Distillation is a process of separating something down into parts to seek its essence, its most potent form. Distillation is the process of separating something down into parts to seek its essence, its most potent form. Intention guides you to your most powerful behavior. Appreciate the sharpness and clarity of discernment. Think of it like a breath of cool air, like a knife that slices down and separates what's important from what's a distraction. It is the lightning strike of revelation. Sometimes we resist clarity when the message is not what we want to hear, but learn to love the sensation of being directed on your path. The goal of this step is to take all the raw information we unlocked about what we truly want in step 3 and sharpen it into a clear and precise direction for our path. Wow, that's beautiful. I ask clearly for what I need, and the universe listens and responds. So I think it's noteworthy that so we opened to step 4 in her process, right? And so I think, and then it's kind of this like a precipice to a certain extent that I feel, where you're at this place where clearly you've done some healing already. Clearly you've done, you've done some healing. You've done some, work around brainstorming and clarity. And so there is like some validation that wants to happen there. Oh my gosh, look at this. Because, not everybody's at that point is what I'm trying to say. Some people they are like still, it wouldn't be powerful and helpful for them to be like sharpening their desires, to be putting action behind their intentions, I'm like trying to think of a verb. What's wanting to come through, which is just so bizarre, is like a verb for precise, like precisioning their path. That's so weird. Is there a verb for precise? I don't think so. But adding precision. Okay, so clearly there's like this call where you've done enough self-discovery work, you've done enough personal growth work, you've done enough healing work to be adding some precision, which is kind of like an oxymoron or like a paradox, right? Like adding precision is a bizarre way to say it, right? Because precision means more like an editing, right? But I think the reason it's coming through that way is because adding precision, there is like a potency that you're adding to your path, right? And it's not helpful to add potency. It's not helpful to add momentum at all stages in our journey. Like there are some stages, as it said in there, where it's about distillation. It's about discernment and cutting through and editing. But then there are other stages in our journey where it is helpful to add momentum in a very precise way. And so I think it's really cool that you are, or it's just very noteworthy that that's what's coming through, because it's definitely an indication that you've done a lot of work up until this point. And there seems to be like an exciting shift for you happening right now in this change of season. Okay, let's get to the story that these cards are telling. So the intention of this reading was money advice from Spirit at the time you find this video. And what came out was the 7 of Cups in reverse, Judgment in reverse, 5 of Cups upright, Queen of Pentacles upright. And look at this Queen of Pentacles card. Isn't that gorgeous? I mean, it's gorgeous on its own, but isn't it so pretty with this arrangement? Oh my gosh, I love it so much. Okay. Okay. So there's a pretty cohesive message coming through here. Let's see if I can bring some cohesive words to it. So we start off, the first card that came out was the Seven of Cups in reverse, which I absolutely love. I think I have a very personal connection to the Seven of Cups in reverse, because to me, it represents the detoxing, or often, and I'm definitely getting this vibe in this reading, it represents the detoxing of fantasy thinking. So the Seven of Cups upright can, in a positive sense, it can represent like a lot of choices, dreaming big, fantasy thinking in a good sense where you're letting yourself dream big about what it is that you want. But in a toxic sense, it can be like you're stuck in fantasy thinking and you're always dreaming, but you're not able to ground those dreams into reality. And I myself am a very, very Pisces person. I've got water all over my chart. So I can get, and cups is a water energy. It's a very intangible, dreamy energy. And if I am not careful, I can go into the toxicity of that. And by careful, I just mean aware. And understand that I have the tendency to do that if I'm also not grounding myself. So I have had a long and interesting journey with the Seven of Cups energy. And what I will say, why I love the Seven of Cups in reverse, is because the more I have detoxed that toxic fantasy thinking, the better and better and better my actual life experience is getting. And so I love that that's how this advice starts, just because I personally know the power of that in my own life. And there's a bit of a paradox here because, we opened with our book Method of Divination, we opened to this chapter that's all about essentially kind of a little bit of fantasy thinking to a certain extent, where it's like it's time to really understand the power of your intentions, right? And setting intentions and understanding the power of intentions is sort of an intangible practice, right? But at the same time, the author here, she's very, very diligent about the idea of putting action behind those intentions. So I guess that's another beautiful way to describe this Seven of Cups in reverse is it can't just be intention. There has to also be action with the intention, because ultimately the universe listens to our behaviors, right? Our actions are what ground anything, and our actions are what we actually believe. You know what I mean? Because we can say a lot of things, but our behavior and our actions always show ultimately what we truly believe. And so there's something here about like the detoxing of that fantasy thinking, and I think there's like an encouragement to be aware of it, but there's also like a letting you know that you're in that season where I think two things, the more you put action behind your intentions, the more you're going to detox this fantasy thinking. But then secondly, looking at your actions to give you information about what you actually might believe is true, and then seeing if there's a discrepancy between what you say you want and what you say you value compared to what your behaviors say that you believe and that you value. And when you can notice that discrepancy and work to close it, that's going to be detoxing this fantasy thinking. And as you're detoxing the fantasy thinking, you're going to more and more be able to ground. So the paradox is detoxing the toxic fantasy thinking helps you actually ground your true fantasies into reality. Okay, so let's move on now to the Judgment in reverse, because actually the Judgment in reverse and the Five of Pentacles are kind of together here. And let's take note that they're in the center of your reading, okay? And P.S., they're leading to the Queen of Pentacles. So I think this is kind of like almost like a chronological story to a certain extent here, in that like, or like almost like a step-by-step story, You know what I mean? Which is just interesting because that book was talking, we opened to the fourth step in her protocol for more and more healing your relationship with your finances, and en route to being the Queen of Pentacles, to experiencing the Queen of Pentacles, to embodying the Queen of Pentacles. So I just love that that came out as the fourth card. So let's talk about these two powerful cards in the middle. When I see Judgment in reverse, I often think of regret, okay? And then we've got the Five of Cups upright, which is often a card of despair, deep heartbreak, or not necessarily heartbreak, that's more of Three of Swords, but like almost like depression, okay? Just like sad and grief and despair. So don't get too worried here, because if you remember, this isn't a predictive reading, and I actually rarely read tarot in a predictive way. I like to more read it in a like insightful way of like what, you know, like, so here, like advice from spirit, okay? So with all that being said, the advice that I'm getting, and I just think it's sort of bizarre because I just listened to something literally minutes before sitting down to do this, and I'll tell you how it relates. But first I'll say the advice that I'm getting is to just let yourself feel grief and sadness over past, over regrets you have from the past that may have come from actions you took in alignment with fantasy thinking versus in alignment with reality. In alignment, so actions you took in alignment with toxic fantasy thinking that have not led to what you thought you wanted, and there is allowing yourself to feel some grief over that. Now, it seems a bit counterintuitive, right? But what I mentioned that I was just listening to, is this guy Jerry Wise. I'll link up his. He's a therapist, and if you're looking for doing some healing work in that arena, he's really great. I'll link up his YouTube channel on this on the description box of this video. And P.S. I do think it aligns beautifully with money because. You know, the more work that I do in the realm of healing my finances, the more I realize it's really often about, you know, relationship dynamics and how I've been taught how I'm willing to be in relationship, value myself, how I interact with others. And that Money Magic book is a lot about that too, like seeing your relationship with money and healing your finances much more holistically than we are typically thought to interact with it. So with that being said, the reason I'm just like a little weirded out in a beautiful way is he said something so striking in this video I was watching. He said the two most powerful ways to feel more calm in your life is to own your powerlessness to change other people and to own your grief work. So let's just take a breath on that. So the two most powerful ways to feel more calm, which is really this groundedness. Queen of Pentacles, she feels grounded, calm, and resourced to me, right? She doesn't feel up in fantasy thinking. There is a groundedness and a peace to her that I think we all desire, right? And so once again, he said, so my point is like calmness can associate with this Queen of Pentacles energy. He said the two most powerful ways. He's been a therapist for 45 years. He said, how do people actually get to calmness more and more? Owning your powerlessness, not your power, owning your powerlessness to change other people, and owning your grief work. Okay? And so this whole story here, I mean, certainly these two cards in the middle, but even it, starting off with the Seven of Cups in reverse, this whole story of these three cards leading to the Queen of Pentacles is really, to me, screaming, owning your grief work. This is not always fun to hear because, like, who wants to do grief work? Oh my God. And I'm like feeling the power in it because in regards to money, well, Well, what I was going to say is, again, what the story of these three cards, I'm seeing there was like some sort of toxic fantasy thinking. So it's saying like, in terms of money advice from spirit, it's like, be willing to look clearly at what toxic fantasy thinking may have led to actions that you took that caused some regret. And instead of continuing to think in that fantasy realm to avoid feeling the grief about that, there is this power in instead just seeing it clearly, feeling the grief, and moving on. You know what I mean? And I don't mean to undermine. I don't mean to undermine grief. I don't mean to undermine situations our past selves get us in that we have to liberate ourselves from. But I also think what is extremely toxic is when we keep doubling down on the delusion. Do you know what I mean? I think that's where we get into real trouble. I think when we're willing to more and more liberate ourselves from the delusion, from the fantasy thinking, see things clearly, and realize, like, you know, we have the right to make mistakes, and we have the right to be in messy situations. Like, we're human, that's okay. But so instead of using like toxic fantasy thinking to like cover up and being like, we're okay, just being like, maybe I really made some mistakes here. Maybe I got myself into some rough binds. And it might not even be with money, because like money doesn't always equate to money. Like, money problems don't, or so like if you have problems with your money, usually at the root, they don't really have much to do with money, right? And sometimes even if you don't have problems with your money, like at the root, there might be like something not great at the foundation that's like allowing your money to be good. Do you know what I'm saying? So my point is, I think it's wise for us all to look a few layers deeper than we are accustomed to, and see how, like, even if you don't have regrets about what you've done with money, if there's other regrets in your life, maybe having to do with relationships, so on and so forth, that might be connected to your what you want with your money, what you're experiencing with your money. Okay. And so there's definitely, you know, there's this phenomenon, it's called the sunk cost fallacy. And it's that we as humans, when we make any sort of initial investment in something, whether it's time, money, or attention, labor, we like to think that it was a good investment. And so we will often keep sinking more time, money, energy, and labor into it to make it a good investment, right? But a lot of times, or almost all the time, the sunk cost fallacy is in alignment with the Seven of Cups. It's some sort of fantasy thinking. And this does not just have to do with financial investments. You know, at one point in my journey, it's still a part of my journey, my healing journey, but not as intense, but I like dove deep into true crime and cult documentaries, because I was realizing that my definition of danger and safety was off. I was realizing that my definition of like good and evil was off, and that I wanted to know, and I don't think this is the route everybody has to go, for sure. This was just my journey, but I really wanted to like look square in the eye at like some of the worst things human beings have done and can do, and understand more why, instead of being in this like delusional space about it. And it's been really powerful for me, because I've looked at it through more of a trauma-aware, trauma-informed lens. And instead of being like, oh, that could never happen to me, or I would never do that, I instead am like, how has that already happened to me in, you know, same form or same content, different form? So that I learn from it to actually establish definitions in my life of safety and danger that keep me and people I care about safe, and actually establish definitions of good and evil that actually start to have me causing less harm to others instead of more harm unconsciously. Okay. So one of the conclusions I've come to as I've done this deep, dark dive into the essentially worst things humans can do to each other, is that the doubling down on delusion is really, it's what is the difference between between good and evil, frankly. And you don't have to use those terms. I'm kind of using them for like more of a shock effect, but hopefully you understand what I mean. I think I thought, as I was growing up, I think I thought somebody like consciously chose to be evil and they knew they were the bad guy and they were just like being the bad guy, versus somebody who is doubling down on delusion and that sunk cost fallacy, where you had like an initial belief about something, and it didn't work out, and so you keep having to put investments in and twist your beliefs. It's like you're having to deal with that cognitive dissonance. And I think what we do with that cognitive dissonance is everything. It's like the most important thing. And I think a lot of the reasons we're willing to do all these dances around the cognitive dissonance is because we don't want to feel grief, which is like rightfully so. Nobody wants to feel grief. We don't want to feel grief about past mistakes. We don't want to feel grief about how we've harmed others. We don't want to feel grief about how others harm us. We don't want to feel grief about how others are still harming us and they don't seem to care and they're not willing to change their behavior. It's deep and it's dark. And I don't mean to make light of it, like, oh, just go ahead and do your grief work and then you'll be the Queen of Pentacles. But go ahead and do your grief work and then no, I'm just kidding. I certainly hope that you, get the support you need to do this in a safe and kind way to yourself. So I'm not trying to make light of grief work, but I also think that the story of these cards are strong and powerful. And that is, if you are willing to get out of, notice fantasy thinking, and detox it, get into the realm of reality. Oh my gosh, I'm thinking of something else I recently listened to and I don't know who to credit to, but it was saying how if we grew up in like a dysfunctional society, right, which the Western culture is just it's just dripping with dysfunction, right, then we often, what was it? It was a symptom of that is that you are willing to believe you often believe the impossible and disbelieve the obvious. So let's just take a breath on that. You often believe the impossible and disbelieve the obvious. Because when we were children growing up in the dysfunctional environment, it was like you couldn't believe the obvious because you had no power or control. And so then instead, that would make everybody around you in the system corrupt. And that was too terrifying for our childhood selves to believe. So then we would usually believe like fantasy thoughts, or even the impossible, that we as children, powerless beings, must be so powerful and so wrong that we're like affecting the environment around us. Okay, so then we have this tendency, if we don't do our deep-rooted healing work, to still have the pattern of believing the impossible and disbelieving the obvious. Okay, so the paradox is, if we want our beautiful, powerful, impossible dreams to come true, we have to start believing the obvious. Okay, which is the story of these cards. We're detoxing fantasy thinking, we're labeling things accurately, we're believing the obvious, we're looking at where there's deep regret about things that we've done in the past. We're allowing ourselves to be human about that. Every human feels that deep, deep regret. The strong thing is, in my opinion, is a willingness to look at that and feel that instead of avoid that. In fact, I think more and more, like, I feel like about every year as I'm on this deep healing transformational journey, it's like I don't know if it's every year, but it's like I look back and I'm like, wow, I'm just like deeply embarrassed about who I used to be. and that's not like to dishonor my past self. Although if I let it get toxic, it can get in that vein, but I try to be aware, but instead to honor my current self and my growth of like, okay, if I am embarrassed, that's a good sign is what I'm trying to say. When you actually get to a point where you feel deep regret, paradoxically, it is a good sign because it means you have grown. Where when we're not feeling the regret, what that means is we're doubling down on the fantasy thinking. We are in that sunk cost phenomenon versus in the realm of the obvious and the in the realm of reality, right? And so the bridge, the portal, the door that's in between our past, just having fantasies about a great, financial freedom, and our past mistakes, the door between that and the Queen of Pentacles, where there is a grounded reality happening of a resourced person. The door is the Five of Cups. The door is the grief work. Because once we get to the realm of the obvious and reality, we have to feel grief. There's a grief in giving up and exchanging fantasy thinking for reality. But then there's a cost to it, right? And the cost is that grief. That grief grounds us into the realm of reality. But then the payoff is that in reality, we can make choices in alignment with the intention of in alignment with our Queen of Pentacles intention. And then our actions actually lead to that because we're in the realm of reality. You know what I mean? I found that this manifestation journey is just such a paradox, isn't it? Because there's like one side of it that's like dream so big and you're so powerful, right? And then there's truth to that, but I don't think it's the full truth. It hasn't been my experience that that's the full truth, because that dreaming big also needs to be rooted and grounded and in the realm of reality. Otherwise, we're just doing the delusional thinking that causes so many problems in each of our lives personally, but then also collectively. So I think this is just one of the most powerful readings I've ever done in the money realm. I think if you're with me at this point, you are such a cool and strong individual. And although like some of these messages might not have been easy to hear, I don't mean to undermine the gravity of grief work or anything like that. I also am getting such a positive, powerful sense. I mean, you end with the Queen of Pentacles, which is like almost, it's like almost like too cliche in a money reading. So I'm getting such a positive sense, and like that you're ready to hear this, and if it's resonating and you put it into practice, I really think you have so much to be excited about and hopeful for in the realm of your finances, because it is such you're willing to get to the root of some of these things instead of trying to always be managing things superficially. You're somebody clearly who's willing to look at the more root level issues and / foundation. It's not even just issues. It's just like, what would, for me to be in an enduring way experience the Queen of Pentacles, like what does that foundation have to entail? What is the foundation of the Queen of Pentacles? And at this point in your journey, it seems like the detoxing of this fantasy thinking, the willingness to do grief work so that you're not holding grief at an arm's length away. And, I think we all do really bizarre things when we're holding grief at an arm's length away. But when we more and more get accustomed to it as a feeling, as a sensation, then we have capacity. We know we have capacity for it, so we aren't always so scared of it. And then we don't do some of the things that we do when we are scared of it. You know what I mean? And that seems to be like just a powerful foundation to sustain Queen of Pentacles versus maybe having glimpses of the Queen of Pentacles, right? This feels really sustainable because it is being prefaced with this work and this willingness from you. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for tuning in. Actually, we'll just finish here. Let's read this intention one more time to finish it up. Or in affirmation, it says, I am clear, or excuse me, we'll start again. I ask clearly for what I need, and the universe listens and responds.